Rich millionaire's affair with Mistress Shatters, his family. Pregnant wife seeks revenge. The clink of crystal glasses and the warm hum of polite conversation once defined the glamorous life of Leonard White, a self-made millionaire who seemed to have it all until an affair with his vivacious mistress threatened to shatter everything he'd built. Today, the twisted truths behind Leonard's secret rendezvous are poised to destroy his marriage, his reputation, and perhaps even his fortune. Clara, his pregnant wife, once believed nothing could shake their perfect world, but betrayal has a way of igniting vengeance in the most unexpected places. This is the story of how trust fractured, how hearts hardened, and how revenge took center stage. Leonard White was the embodiment of every young entrepreneur's dream. As a kid growing up in a modest suburban home, he often pored over business magazines, gazing at the powerful figures who dominated the world stage. He pinned pictures of real-life moguls on his bedroom wall: Warren Buffett, Bernard Arnault, Jeff Bezos, imagining the day he would join their ranks. At the age of 35, he was well on his way. His empire, White Tech Innovations, specialized in pioneering cybersecurity solutions for international corporations, and had catapulted him to financial success most could only dream of. He met Clara Peterson at a charity gala in Manhattan. Clara, with her flowing chestnut hair and gentle demeanor, was a pediatric nurse who ran a volunteer program for disadvantaged children. She hailed from a humble background too, and her compassion and sincerity enthralled Leonard. From the moment he saw her across the crowded ballroom, he introduced himself, heart-pounding, not quite sure if such a radiant woman would give him a second glance. But Clara recognized in him a tender vulnerability behind his carefully tailored suit. Though wealthy men circled that gala like hawks, Clara soon found Leonard refreshingly genuine. Over the months that followed, their romance grew with the kind of gentle ease that felt nothing short of magical. Clara was unaccustomed to the flash of paparazzi cameras and the red carpet events that came with dating a rising tech star, but Leonard guarded her fiercely, determined to protect the sanctuary of their relationship. When he proposed atop the Empire State Building, just the two of them under the sparkling city lights, she said yes between tearful laughter. Their wedding was grand yet intimate, blending the extravagance of Leonard's newfound wealth with Clara's grounded humility. For the first few years of their marriage, everything was idyllic. They lived in a sleek penthouse in Manhattan's Upper East Side, traveling often to philanthropic events or romantic getaways in tropical destinations. People whispered that Leonard and Clara personified the ultimate power couple, a charismatic businessman with a heart of gold and a nurturing nurse who wanted to help heal the world. To outsiders, their life seemed perfect, but reality was more complex. Leonard, driven by both ambition and a burning desire to continue proving himself, never stopped pushing. With White Tech Innovations attracting deals from the biggest firms across Europe and Asia, he worked long hours. He had grown up idolizing success stories and refused to let this chance slip away. Clara supported him, but there were evenings she lay alone in bed, noticing the faint coffee stains on his shirts, the pungent aroma of stress, and wondering when he would finally come home before midnight. Eventually, that distance created cracks in what had once been an unbreakable bond. At first, it was simply the slow fade of romance into routine. Even as they planned for children, Leonard became a stranger in his own home, quietly exhausted, emotionally absent. Clara tried her best to be understanding, but with each lonely night, an invisible wall of tension rose between them. In the midst of this subtle drift, Leonard stumbled upon a woman who promised excitement and escape a vibrant tornado named Valentina Marshall. A marketing consultant with a portfolio of global brands under her belt, Valentina was every bit as driven as Leonard, but she came cloaked in intrigue. She had a sharp tongue, a penchant for whiskey on the rocks, and an irreverent sense of humor that both shocked and delighted him. Their paths crossed at an industry conference in Chicago, where Valentina spoke eloquently about brand management in a crisis. Leonard admired her poise, her fierce intellect, her ability to command a room with a single glance. They shared drinks that evening in the hotel bar. One drink became two, then three, and soon the conversation shifted from casual chatter about marketing trends to more personal confessions. Valentina revealed she had been engaged once, but called it off to pursue her global consulting career. Leonard described how he sacrificed personal time with Clara for the sake of scaling white tech. The more they talked, the more they recognized a hunger for adventure in each other, something dangerously unfulfilled in Leonard's life back in New York. By the time the conference concluded, they had exchanged phone numbers under the guise of professional collaboration. In truth, Leonard was already enthralled by Valentina's audacity. She was refreshing where Clara was comforting, unpredictable where Clara was steady. And that unpredictability sparked a thrill inside him he hadn't felt since the early days of his business ventures. Yet guilt pulsed in Leonard's mind every time he thought of Clara. He recalled her unwavering support throughout his career, the nights she stayed up waiting for him, the whispered prayers she uttered for his success. He remembered the charitable work she undertook and how it aligned so perfectly with the philanthropic mission he wanted for White Tech. Most of all, he remembered her gentle smile the day he told her he wanted a family, a big, loving home to make up for all the emptiness he'd known as a child. But desire is a powerful force, and it lured Leonard down a path of deception. Late-night phone calls to Valentina were disguised as client calls. Weekend getaways turned into business trips. When he was with her, the world glowed in sharp, exhilarating colors. Still, a tiny voice in the back of his mind questioned whether the price for this ecstasy was worth it. Clara sensed something was off. She couldn't put her finger on it, but the emotional distance had grown too wide. She tried to open up dialogue, but every time she asked if he was all right, Leonard brushed her off, claiming exhaustion, insisting he needed to focus on the next big contract. Meanwhile, his phone buzzed with messages from Valentina at odd hours. And then, in a twist so unexpected it seemed unreal, Clara discovered she was pregnant. Nervous and ecstatic, she imagined this was a sign they would heal, that a baby would bring them closer. In her mind, everything would fall into place. They would become a family at last. She fantasized about telling Leonard in a sweet, unforgettable way, a note hidden under his coffee mug, an ultrasound photo in a frame. But something in his demeanor felt so distant, she worried her news might barely register in the flurry of his business deals. In the quiet corners of her heart, Clara prayed that their child would bring back the tenderness that seemed lost. She had no inkling that Leonard's heart was drifting, that her husband had already ensnared himself in a secret he couldn't easily escape. But soon, events would conspire in such a way that the truth came roaring into the light, and once it did, nothing would ever be the same for Leonard White, his adoring wife, and the mistress who sparked it all. A month passed after the Chicago conference. Valentina and Leonard maintained a covert, flirtatious relationship over text. It started with discussions about marketing strategies, what the tech industry needed to handle brand crises effectively, but soon their conversations turned personal. Late nights, alone in his home office, found Leonard leaning back in his leather chair, phone in hand, reading Valentina's witty messages. If Clara walked in unexpectedly, he'd snap upright and pretend to be analyzing spreadsheets. Between the adrenaline rush of White Tech's latest corporate merger and the allure of Valentina's intellect, Leonard felt intoxicated by life again. He remembered how, as a young man, he had thrived off risk and adventure, taking leaps of faith that either soared or crashed. His career had evened out in recent years. Everything was stable and safe. Yet in those stabilizing times, he realized he'd lost the edge of unpredictability he once prided himself on. When Clara hinted at a surprise she wanted to share, Leonard's response was half-hearted. He was preoccupied with the possibility of meeting Valentina again. She had invited him to a marketing summit in Los Angeles, claiming they could collaborate on a project for White Tech's brand revamp. The invitation was professional on the surface. Beneath that veneer, it thrummed with a promise of passion. Clara tried to sit him down one evening to reveal her pregnancy in the sweetest manner possible. She baked lemon cupcakes, his favorite, and frosted them with tiny footprints. The gesture felt childlike, magical. She set them neatly on a silver tray, waiting by the kitchen table, hands trembling with the excitement of telling him he would be a father. But Leonard returned home in a foul mood. A lawsuit threat from a competitor had him on edge, and the stress hardened his features. He barely glanced at the cupcakes, dismissing them as too sweet for his taste tonight. Clara, deflated, decided to hold off on her announcement. She sensed this was not the right time. Instead, she wrapped the cupcakes and placed them in the fridge, hoping to try again soon. On the other side of town, Valentina was preparing for Leonard's arrival with a thrill of her own. She booked a luxury suite in a Beverly Hills hotel, convinced Leonard would appreciate the lavish setting. Though Valentina prided herself on being independent and career-focused, there was an undercurrent of deep longing within her. She had grown weary of men who couldn't keep up with her. Leonard was different, powerful, resourceful, and respectable in the corporate world. The forbidden nature of their connection ignited an even more potent spark. Before leaving for Los Angeles, Leonard concocted a story about needing to finalize a new deal with a West Coast client. Clara's eyes shone with quiet disappointment, but she didn't protest. She'd seen him jet off countless times for business, though recently the frequency had soared. As Leonard packed his suitcase, he found the ultrasound photo tucked under one of his shirts. Clara must have hidden it there, maybe as a subtle hint. He picked it up, eyes wide with confusion. The black and white image of a tiny forming life blinked back at him in the half-light. For a heartbeat, warmth and wonder filled his chest. He realized instantly what it meant. Clara was pregnant. The fatherhood he once dreamed of was no longer hypothetical. It was here. But then the guilt returned. His flight was booked, his mistress waiting. This was supposed to be a major turning point in his life. He should have been overjoyed. Instead, conflicting emotions swirled like a tempest. He shoved the photo back into the suitcase without mentioning it to Clara. That night, he said goodbye with a distracted kiss on her forehead and left for the airport. Clara found out he'd discovered the photo when she saw it was no longer in the drawer where she left it. A wave of devastation hit her. He knew she was pregnant, yet he said nothing, no excitement, no discussion about the future. As the door clicked shut behind him, she realized there was a chasm between them she couldn't ignore. In Los Angeles, Valentina greeted Leonard at the airport, wearing a designer blouse and a triumphant smile. They took a black car service to the hotel, exchanging conspiratorial looks. Despite the tension gnawing at Leonard's conscience, the attraction he felt for Valentina was overpowering. He told himself that, at least for the weekend, he would live in the moment. That evening, after the summit sessions concluded, they retreated to Valentina's suite. The city lights of Los Angeles sprawled beneath them. They opened an expensive bottle of champagne and toasted to collaboration. The vibrant laughter and stolen kisses made Leonard feel alive, but somewhere, beneath it all, he sensed the precarious cliff edge he was dancing upon. Back in New York, Clara sobbed into her pillow. She was no stranger to her husband's business travels, but never had she felt so utterly alone. This was a time they should be celebrating. She was carrying his child. The man she loved was halfway across the country, unresponsive to her calls, too busy to even acknowledge the milestone they'd both dreamed of. With trembling fingers, she scrolled through pictures from their wedding day, remembering the promise in Leonard's eyes, how he vowed to stand by her, no matter what. Now, she wondered if that promise had become an afterthought. Two worlds spun in parallel, one in a Beverly Hills hotel suite filled with laughter and sin, the other in a quiet Manhattan penthouse consumed by tears and heartbreak. And with every passing hour, the threads of Leonard's double life entwined tighter around his marriage, strangling what little trust remained. When he eventually returned to New York, the evidence of his betrayal would no longer hide so easily, and Clara, now more emotionally vulnerable than ever, would begin to see the faint outlines of a dark truth. A week after Leonard's escapade, news of his potential affair reached the ears of someone who had no intention of keeping it a secret. Jackie Russo, one of Clara's close friends and a fellow nurse at the pediatric clinic, was known for her protective nature. Jackie had connections in PR circles, and some of her acquaintances had seen Leonard with Valentina at posh restaurants. Innocent at first glance, but the body language told a different story. Jackie wrestled with the decision to tell Clara, fearing the heartbreak it might cause, but also convinced that a friend's loyalty should include honesty. Meanwhile, Leonard returned home caught between remorse and longing. He found Clara's eyes red-rimmed, her face pale. She had been battling morning sickness, but also the weight of an unspoken betrayal. He hesitated to bring up her pregnancy. Guilt gnawed at him. Clara, sensing that now was better than never, softly announced that they were expecting a baby. She expressed her wish that this child could restore the closeness they once shared. Leonard forced a smile, hugging her stiffly. He murmured words of congratulations, but the spark in his eyes had dimmed. Later that day, Clara and Jackie met for lunch at a quaint cafe near the clinic. Jackie agonized over whether to reveal her suspicions. As Clara spoke about Leonard's distracted behavior, Jackie's resolve hardened. Unable to bear watching Clara suffer, she finally confessed what she had heard. She kept her tone gentle, explaining that she didn't want to upset Clara without proof. But rumors were swirling about Leonard and some marketing consultant. Clara almost dropped her coffee mug. For years, she had worried that Leonard's constant absences might lead him astray, but she had always brushed the thought aside, trusting his integrity. Now, hearing it from a trusted friend, the possibility morphed into a horrifying reality. She felt an odd numbness, as though her emotions had short-circuited. When Jackie insisted that the rumors might be nothing more than misunderstandings, Clara's mind churned. She decided she had to find out for herself, no matter how painful. That evening, Clara confronted Leonard gently, not with accusations, but with a trembling question. Is there someone else? Leonard stiffened, a flicker of panic in his eyes. He had rehearsed excuses before, but he never believed Clara would directly ask him. With a tight swallow, he denied everything, attributing his distance to work stress. Clara's heart twisted. She wanted to believe him, but the doubt festered. Over the next few days, Clara noticed small details she had overlooked. The different cologne smell on Leonard's clothes, unexplained credit card charges in cities he claimed were purely for business, and the way he guarded his phone. She began collecting these clues like shards of broken glass. She also discovered a lipstick-stained cocktail napkin in his briefcase with an unfamiliar handwriting that read, "Until next time, L." Her stomach clenched at the sight of it. Still, Leonard insisted everything was normal, that her pregnancy was making her overthink. Yet, he grew increasingly agitated when Clara pressed for any details about his trips. She tried to remain calm, but a storm of conflicting emotions raged inside her. Love, betrayal, despair. She remembered their wedding vows, the happy tears on her parents' faces as she walked down the aisle, convinced she had found a man of integrity. Now it felt like her world was on the brink of collapse, and she was left to pick up the pieces alone. Miles away, Valentina kept up her end of the secret, delighting in the clandestine nature of their relationship. She didn't see Clara as a real obstacle, because in her view, Leonard was already drifting from his marriage. She believed it was only a matter of time before he made his choice. She even pressed Leonard to be honest with Clara, to set himself free, but Leonard, paralyzed by guilt, opted for denial. A part of him might have wanted to end the affair, but he was too weak to relinquish the thrill Valentina offered. Another part still cared for Clara deeply, especially now that she was pregnant with his child. In her desperation, Clara decided to contact one of Leonard's confidants, an old family friend named George Walters. George was one of the few people Leonard truly listened to, a retired businessman who had advised Leonard when he launched White Tech Innovations. Clara poured out her worries, tears breaking through her usually composed facade. George, too, had noticed a change in Leonard's behavior, missed appointments, abrupt secrecy, a newfound recklessness in his business dealings. Concerned, he offered to speak to Leonard man to man. When George cornered Leonard in his office one morning, Leonard bristled. He insisted he was fine, that his marriage was intact, but George pressed, warning him that chasing fleeting temptation could destroy his life. He reminded Leonard of the shame he'd feel if the media sniffed out a scandal. He also reminded him of the family he was about to start. Leonard sank into his office chair, head in his hands, overwhelmed by the magnitude of his double life. For a fleeting moment he resolved to end the affair, but endings are not always clean. While Leonard planned to break things off, Valentina had lined up a new deal in London for one of her clients, offering White Tech a seat at the negotiation table. The allure of expanding his business overseas with Valentina by his side was too enticing to pass up. He rationalized that it was a strictly professional opportunity, that once it was done, he could separate from Valentina gracefully. Yet, deep down, he knew he was stepping closer to the precipice. That afternoon, Clara found out about the London trip by accident. She saw a confirmation email on Leonard's tablet. He hadn't mentioned it to her. The knowledge sliced through her, fueling both suspicion and an unshakable certainty. Leonard was lying. She confronted him, tears streaming as she begged him to be honest. He fired back with frustration, claiming she was overreacting. He needed to secure this deal for the future of their child, he argued, and her questions were undermining his confidence. Their argument escalated, harsh words flying in the penthouse that had once been a haven of warmth and love. In a fit of rage, Leonard stormed out, slamming the door so hard it rattled the walls. Clara, feeling the baby inside her, a life that needed stability and care, sank to the floor, hugging her stomach. She knew then that the man she had loved might be gone, replaced by someone she scarcely recognized. The masks each of them wore, Leonard's of a faithful husband, Valentina's of a mere consultant, and Clara's of a woman denying the truth, had begun to slip. In their place, raw emotions and hidden agendas would soon collide. And when they did, the consequences would not only shatter their private worlds, but reverberate far beyond, leaving reputations, relationships, and even fortunes hanging in the balance. The day Leonard flew to London was overcast, matching his mood. He boarded the plane with a hollow feeling in his chest. Valentina would join him a few days later, and although the thought of seeing her sent a rush of anticipation through his veins, the memory of Clara's tear-streaked face lingered, souring the excitement. In New York, Clara made a decision that tested her resolve. She contacted a private investigator, a woman named Natasha Delgado, known for her discretion and thoroughness. As much as Clara hated the idea of prying into Leonard's life, her intuition screamed that she needed evidence. "If he won't tell me the truth, I'll find it myself," she reasoned, heart pounding with trepidation. Natasha listened compassionately as Clara explained the situation, the suspicious trips, the rumors, the emotional distance. At the mention of Valentina's name, Natasha took careful notes. She informed Clara that tailing someone overseas would be pricey, but if Clara could provide travel details, she might glean enough from local contacts and digital footprints without physically being in London. Clara, fueled by heartbreak, wrote a check that made her hand tremble. With it, she placed her final hopes of discovering the truth. Meanwhile, Leonard was juggling business meetings in the upscale district of Mayfair. The negotiations for White Tech's expansion were intense. He knew a successful deal could cement his reputation, drawing him closer to the likes of the business titans he'd admired in his youth. Yet every time he stepped outside the boardroom, he caught himself checking his phone for messages from Clara or from Valentina. Valentina arrived wearing a sleek coat, greeting him with a brazen kiss on the cheek in the hotel lobby. They had separate rooms for propriety's sake, but they both knew it was only a facade. The nights melted into a blur of extravagant dinners and stolen embraces. One evening, Valentina booked a private dinner at a posh restaurant that overlooked the Thames. Over candlelight, she pressed him on the future. "When this deal is done," she whispered, "where do we stand?" Leonard paused, swirling the wine in his glass. "I don't know. I'm not proud of any of this, Valentina. I can't just walk away from Clara. He faltered, the image of Clara as an expectant mother slicing into his conscience. "She's pregnant." Valentina's eyes widened for a split second, a flicker of jealousy mixed with something akin to fear. But her ambition wouldn't let her walk away so easily. "If she's pregnant, then you have more reason than ever to decide what you really want," she said, quietly, her voice laced with urgency. "Leonard, I can't keep doing this halfway. Either you break it off with her, or—" She left the threat hanging in the air. Back in New York, Clara anxiously awaited Natasha's updates. She busied herself by volunteering extra hours at the clinic, as if caring for children offered some balm for her wounded heart. Jackie stood by her side, whispering words of encouragement, occasionally glancing at Clara's growing belly with concern. Though Clara wanted to remain strong, each day felt heavier. The tears came at odd moments, passing a baby store, hearing a love song on the radio, recalling how Leonard used to surprise her with small tokens of affection. She wondered if that man was gone forever. Natasha sent an encrypted email one night that Clara opened with trembling fingers. Attached were photos of Leonard and Valentina dining at an upscale establishment in London, arms linked as they left. One image showed them kissing on a deserted sidewalk in the glow of streetlights. Clara clenched her teeth, tears slipping down her cheeks. There it was, undeniable proof. All her worst fears confirmed in a single snapshot. Rage, heartbreak, and a strange sense of relief rolled over her in waves. She wasn't crazy. He was truly betraying her. She stared at the images long after her tears dried, her mind whirring. She thought of confronting Leonard the moment he returned, demanding an explanation. But as she stared at Valentina's smug expression, a darker notion seeped in. He did this to me while I'm carrying his child. Why should I be the only one suffering? When Leonard eventually returned from London, carrying a stack of business documents and a forced air of triumph, Clara was waiting. She had printed the photos and laid them on the living room table. No shouting greeted him, no tears. Just deafening silence as he walked in, expression darkening. The moment he realized what she had discovered, Clara stood by the window, arms crossed protectively over her stomach. "I know," she said, voice trembling but resolute. "I have the photos. I know everything. You didn't even have the decency to hide it well, did you?" Leonard's face went pale. He opened his mouth to protest, but the words died in his throat. For a moment, he looked like a frightened boy, cornered and remorseful. "Clara, I don't," she snapped. Don't insult me with another lie. I gave you every chance to tell me. I begged for honesty. But you chose to leave me here, alone and pregnant, while you gallivanted around London with your mistress. Her voice cracked on the word pregnant, and Leonard felt his heart sink. I'm sorry, he breathed, at a loss for anything else. I never meant to hurt you. Clara gave a bitter laugh, tears now threatening to spill. Do you have any idea what you've done? I believed in you. I waited for you night after night, kept your secrets, cheered you on, and this is how you repay me. With betrayal? He tried to approach her, arms outstretched in some misguided attempt at comfort. She recoiled. Don't, she warned. You made your choice. You think I'm a fool? You humiliated me? You might have jeopardized everything we worked for. Leonard swallowed hard, guilt gnawing at him. Clara, please. I was weak. I know this is all my fault, but we can try to fix it, can't we? I don't want to lose you, or our child. She stared at him with disbelief. Fix it? You want to fix it? Because now that you're caught, you suddenly care. Her voice cracked, raw with pain and anger. I'm not sure if there's anything left to fix. You need to leave. The finality of her words hit him like a sledgehammer. He pleaded, tried to reason, but Clara stood firm. She refused to let him remain in the penthouse, the place that had once been their fortress of love. Eventually, with shame burning his cheeks, Leonard packed a suitcase and left. Though Clara had demanded he go, a part of her shattered the moment the door closed behind him. She sank to her knees, hands resting on her belly, tears flowing anew. For the first time since learning she was pregnant, she questioned if she wanted Leonard's involvement at all. Yes, she needed financial support, but emotionally, he had already left her, following the siren call of Valentina. What future was left for a man who chose desire over devotion? For Leonard, stepping out into the city night with a suitcase in hand was surreal. The empire he built suddenly felt like an empty shell. Valentina might welcome him with open arms, but what had he truly gained? He was left only with regret and a moral hangover he couldn't shake. As he hailed a taxi, he recognized that everything he once took for granted, his wife's trust. The sanctity of his home was unraveling, and in its wake, a tsunami of consequences was about to break. In the aftermath of Leonard's exile from his own penthouse, Valentina seized the moment to solidify her place in his life. She invited him to stay at her upscale apartment in Midtown, an offer he initially resisted. His pride balked at the thought of moving into his lover's space, but he had few alternatives. Most of the hotels he frequented were either too visible or held memories of clandestine nights with Valentina, risks he couldn't afford with the rising tide of gossip. The arrangement was tense from the start. While Valentina tried to establish a sense of domesticity cooking dinner, arranging fresh flowers in the living room, Leonard found himself overwhelmed by guilt. He stared out the window of her lavish high-rise, missing the warmth of home, the gentleness of Clara, the intangible comfort of a marriage that once seemed unbreakable. Meanwhile, Valentina insisted he should cut ties with Clara, finalize a separation, and brace for the inevitable media storm. What neither Leonard nor Valentina anticipated was Clara's fury evolving into something sharper, a thirst for revenge. She had grown tired of being the victim, of sobbing into her pillow while her betrayer waltzed off with his mistress. The pain hardened into anger, which she channeled into action. Quietly, she began building a strategy to ensure Leonard felt the consequences of his betrayal, and she started by leveraging his greatest vulnerability, his public image. Clara had never been one to seek the limelight, but she was aware of the power wielded by headlines. Through her volunteer work, she had connections in philanthropic circles, as well as local news outlets. She also kept an archive of philanthropic events that featured Leonard's name charities he supported, galas he sponsored. She knew how important it was for White Tech Innovations to maintain a squeaky clean reputation, especially with the international deal pending. One evening she confided in Jackie, who was shocked by her newfound resolve. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Exposing him publicly could get messy, Jackie cautioned. Clara's jaw set in determination. "He's the one who dragged me into this mess. He turned our life into a scandal. Why should I shield him from the truth any longer?" She shot Jackie a look that mingled heartbreak with cold resolve. He made his bed. Now he can lie in it. Clara reached out to a contact at a local paper, a journalist named Emily Shapiro, who had once interviewed Leonard for a human interest piece on promising entrepreneurs. Emily was sympathetic to Clara's plight, but also recognized the potential for a front-page story. With Clara's permission, she launched her own quiet investigation, collecting statements from anonymous sources, cross-checking Leonard's travel records, and discreetly confirming the rumors of an affair. Emily even managed to speak to a staff member at the London restaurant who remembered seeing Leonard and Valentina looking quite intimate. Before the story could break, White Tech's PR team caught wind of the brewing scandal. Immediately, they attempted damage control, scheduling an emergency meeting with Leonard. Valentina warned him that negative press could torpedo his international expansion, but Leonard, drained from the emotional turmoil, struggled to muster a coherent defense. He oscillated between wanting to salvage his marriage and clinging to Valentina like a lifeline in a storm he had created. The tension reached a fever pitch when a tabloid published a teaser, Millionaire philanthropist Leonard White in shocking love triangle. Sources claim wife is pregnant. The piece included a blurred photo of Leonard with a dark-haired woman believed to be Valentina. Though the article withheld full names, it was enough to set off a torrent of speculation in the business community. Clients began calling White Tech's offices, anxiously asking if the rumors were true. Investors worried about a scandal overshadowing the company's progress. Clara watched from the sidelines, a swirl of satisfaction mingling with regret. She had never wanted to become a public spectacle, but the seeds of her revenge were sprouting. Part of her regretted exposing herself and her unborn child to the harsh glare of tabloid gossip. Yet a colder, embittered part told her Leonard deserved every bit of fallout. If he wanted to destroy their marriage for a fling, he had to face the repercussions. Valentina, furious at the leak, confronted Leonard. "You said you'd handle Clara," she hissed, pacing the length of her living room. "Now we're under attack from every angle. Do something." Leonard ran a hand through his hair, exhausted. "What do you propose I do? Clara's not exactly willing to talk to me, and the press is feeding on any scraps they can find. Hire a crisis PR firm. For starters," Valentina snapped, her eyes flashing. "Spin the narrative. Deny everything. Or," she paused dramatically, "offer a statement that you've amicably separated from Clara, that your relationship is private, anything to quell the rumors." He shook his head, bristling. "You expect me to just publicly abandon my pregnant wife? Even if we're going through a rough patch, that's low." Valentina's features softened for an instant. "I'm not heartless, Leonard, but we have to be realistic. If Clara keeps fanning the flames, it could destroy White Tech and everything you've built. Is that what you want?" Leonard remained silent, turmoil etched on his face. His moral compass had been shattered by his own actions. Now, the potential financial ruin loomed and guilt weighed heavily on him. Deep down, he realized how far he'd strayed from the values he once cherished. Conflicted, he turned away from Valentina's piercing gaze, as if searching for answers in the city lights outside her window. In the swirl of public speculation, Clara experienced a mixture of anxiety and vindication. She received a call from George Walters, Leonard's old friend, who pleaded with her to reconsider the public route. "Clara, he's made mistakes, but you're airing dirty laundry that might never go away," George said softly. "This could affect the baby someday. Tears welled in Clara's eyes, but her voice stayed firm. George, the first tired of protecting him. He lied to me. He cheated on me while I was pregnant. I deserve better. If he wanted to avoid scandal, he shouldn't have betrayed me. As the scandal intensified, White Tech's board of directors expressed dismay at Leonard's personal entanglements overshadowing business. They convened an emergency session to consider whether Leonard's leadership was now compromised. The murmurs in the corridors suggested that if a bigger crisis erupted like a lawsuit from Clara or a damaging tell-all interview, Leonard might be asked to step down. A bitter irony, given that the London deal was so close to finalization. All the while, Clara collected further evidence, not just of the affair but of potential misuse of company funds for personal trysts, expensive dinners, hotel suites, flights that might be framed as business expenses. If White Tech had inadvertently paid for his affair, it could spell legal trouble for Leonard. Part of Clara hated how vindictive she had become, but each time she felt a pang of guilt. She remembered the humiliation of seeing photos of Leonard with Valentina, the nights of sleeping alone, the heartbreak of hearing him lie. For Leonard, the mistress who once represented excitement and escape now felt like an anchor dragging him down. When he overheard Valentina on the phone boasting to a colleague about managing the PR fiasco, a chill ran through him. He realized that while she had once lit a spark of passion in his life, the cost was now crippling. Not just his marriage, but his career, his legacy, and even his self-respect were on the line. Was she worth it, he wondered, a pang of regret twisting his insides. Yet, the time for second-guessing had passed. Consequences he never imagined were already in motion. The scandal was no longer containable, and Clara, his loving, gentle wife, who had once been content to stand in his shadow, was poised to become the biggest threat to his carefully cultivated empire. The day Clara filed for a legal separation was the day Leonard realized just how precarious his situation had become. A courier arrived at Valentina's apartment with a thick envelope bearing Clara's signature. Inside were documents detailing their assets, a proposed custody agreement for their unborn child, and an official statement that any further contact between them should be handled through their respective attorneys. Leonard sank onto the couch, hands shaking. Despite everything, he hadn't expected Clara to move so decisively. He'd harbored a faint hope that they could reconcile, that she might eventually forgive him. But Clara's actions were as clear as a slammed door. She was done waiting, done hurting. His heart hammered as he read the lines, words like alimony and primary custody leaping off the page. Valentina hovered over him, arms crossed. "So, what now?" she asked, her voice taut. She glanced at the legal documents, reading the subtext of how Clara intended to keep Leonard at arm's length. "Ah, you going to fight her?" He rubbed his temples, a headache pounding. "I don't want a lengthy legal battle. She's pregnant with my child. This is not how I wanted it to go." Valentina's eyes narrowed. "But it's how it's going, unless you do something. If she drags your name through the mud in court, your reputation might never recover. It could kill the London deal too." Leonard scowled. "All you ever think about is that deal." "A child is involved, Valentina. My child. This isn't just a PR crisis." She pressed her lips into a thin line, but said nothing. In her mind, there was no separating the personal from the professional. Everything was connected. At White Tech, the crisis had escalated. The London partners were spooked by the negative press. One of Leonard's biggest domestic clients hinted at pulling out of a contract if the scandal deepened. During a tense board meeting, the directors discussed removing Leonard as CEO temporarily, appointing an interim leader who could distance the company from the affair. Though it wasn't yet a formal motion, the threat loomed large. Exhausted and cornered, Leonard decided to approach Clara directly, despite her legal documents suggesting otherwise. He found her at the volunteer clinic, crouched beside a young patient's bed, whispering soothing words. For a moment, his heart clenched at the sight of her compassion. She had once directed that same tender care toward him. Then she rose, recognized his presence, and her expression hardened. "Clara," he began softly, "I know you said everything should go through lawyers, but I wanted to see if we could talk this through, privately." She glanced around, noticing curious stares from nurses. "Not here," she said tightly. "Wait outside. I have a 10-minute break." When she joined him in the corridor, he saw the toll the past weeks had taken on her. Dark circles rimmed her eyes, and her hand instinctively rested on her abdomen in a protective gesture. He tried to speak, but words failed. After a moment, he simply said, "I'm sorry." She nodded, but her eyes were cold. "I'm sure you are, but apologies don't erase betrayal." He took a deep breath. "I know. I don't expect forgiveness overnight, or maybe ever. I just wanted you to hear from me that I never meant to hurt you like this." Clara's shoulders trembled slightly. "But you did. You hurt me more than I ever thought possible. And now I have to protect myself and this baby from any further damage." Leonard's voice caught in his throat. "I understand why you filed for separation. But do we have to go through the courts? Couldn't we handle this differently? Less publicly?" Her eyes flashed. "Are you worried about what people will think, Leonard? Is that it? Your image? Your business deals?" He exhaled, wrestling with his pride. "I'm worried about everything, including that. But I swear, I also care about you and the baby. I don't want you to suffer." Clara's laugh was bitter. "You think I'm not suffering? You made me a tabloid headline. You made our marriage a mockery. And now you're living with her. How dare you come here acting like you're the wounded one?" Leonard winced at the bite in her words. "I'm not. I'm just asking for a chance to handle this without blowing up our entire lives. We can do mediation, or at least talk to each other, not just lawyers. For the baby's sake." She studied him for a long moment, jaw tight. Finally she said, "Fine, I'll consider mediation, but only if you agree to certain terms. First, you need to move out of her place. I can't negotiate with you while you're shackled to your mistress. Second, no more lies. If I catch you hiding anything else, or spending company funds on personal escapades, I'm done talking." A surge of relief mixed with dread swept through him. "Okay, I'll do what you ask. But you should know Valentina is also integral to some of my business deals. I might need to keep working with her in that capacity." "That's between you and your board," Clara said flatly. "My terms are personal. Abide by them, or our next interaction is in a courtroom." She turned on her heel, leaving Leonard standing there with a swirl of conflicting emotions. He knew that telling Valentina he needed to move out would be explosive, yet if he refused, the legal war with Clara might destroy him entirely. The lines he once blurred between personal desire and professional ambition now had razor-sharp edges. Later that night, Leonard informed Valentina of Clara's ultimatum. As expected, she erupted. "You want me to believe you're moving out just to appease your wife's demands?" she sneered. "You realize this is a step backward in our relationship, right?" Leonard sighed, exhaustion lacing his every word. "It's a compromise, Valentina. If we can settle this civilly, I might salvage some part of my relationship with my child. Otherwise, Clara's going to war, and I'll lose everything." Valentina's expression flickered with something akin to fear. "And what about us? Do I mean so little that you'll just walk away from what we have?" He thought about the stolen kisses, the rush of excitement he once felt in her presence. Now all he felt was suffocating guilt. "I don't know what to say. I never planned for any of this to happen, but I need time to fix things. Or at least to stop the bleeding." She pressed her lips together, tears threatening. For all her bravado, she had staked her pride on Leonard leaving Clara for good. Instead, he was stepping away from her, or at least from cohabitation. In that moment, She felt the precariousness of her position. If Leonard managed to reconcile with Clara, she'd become a memory, a stain he'd try to wash away. She loathed the idea of losing him, especially after all she'd risked. 2 days later, Leonard moved into a penthouse suite owned by a business associate who offered it discreetly. He informed Clara of the address, fulfilling that part of her condition. Despite the hostility between them, Clara felt a faint sense of grim satisfaction knowing he'd left Valentina's apartment. Still, her mind spun with doubts. Was she truly prepared to negotiate? Could she ever trust him again, even for the sake of their baby? In this fragile detente, each of them stood at a crossroads. Clara wrestled with her anger, uncertain whether the talk of mediation was just a ploy. Leonard walked on eggshells, torn between guilt and the last vestiges of his ambition. Valentina smoldered in quiet fury, determined not to be cast aside so easily. And somewhere in the background, the ticking clock of public opinion and White Tech's precarious deals continued to push them all toward a breaking point that mediation alone might not fix. Following their painful confrontation, Leonard and Clara reluctantly agreed to a mediation session with Dr. Martin Reis, who urged them to focus on the welfare of their unborn child. For a moment, hope flickered that they might settle things quietly. But Valentina's sudden interview, where she gloated about her true connection with Leonard, destroyed that fragile peace. Mid-session, Clara read the headline on her phone and erupted in anger. Feeling betrayed once again, she stormed out. Furious, she granted her own interview, sharing how Leonard abandoned her during pregnancy for a flashy affair. Public sympathy swung decisively in her favor as reporters questioned Leonard's integrity and Valentina's motives. Under immense pressure, White Tech's board demanded that Leonard step aside as CEO if the scandal worsened. Valentina, sensing Clara's fury and craving attention, fanned the flames with more provocative comments. Meanwhile, Clara wrestled with her conscience, torn between protecting her reputation and wanting Leonard to face the consequences of his betrayal. Desperate to avoid a full-blown legal battle, Leonard begged Clara for a civil resolution. She demanded he move out of Valentina's apartment and cease all contact with his mistress. Though pained by her ultimatum, he conceded, fearing total ruin. When he informed Valentina of his decision, her rage was swift. She threatened to expose every detail of their affair. With each new headline, Clara hardened her resolve. She was done being a victim. No longer content to suffer in silence, she wielded the truth like a sword, determined to ensure Leonard felt the repercussions of his actions. Meanwhile, Leonard teetered on the brink, realizing that, in chasing Valentina's allure, he might have lost everything he once held dear. After the board at White Tech announced a vote of no confidence, Leonard felt his world caving in. The scandal had tainted his company's reputation, and influential partners threatened to pull out of vital deals. He soon realized that Valentina's persistent interviews and sensational claims were fueling the media frenzy. Determined to salvage what little remained of his dignity, Leonard confronted her late one night, insisting their affair was over for good. Despite her angry threats and tears, he walked away, desperate to repair the damage he'd done. Meanwhile, Clara grew tired of the relentless spotlight. Every morning brought another headline dissecting her pain, her pregnancy, and Valentina's attempts to rewrite the story. Feeling protective of her unborn child, she decided that while she could never forget Leonard's betrayal, she would allow him a chance to be present for doctor's appointments under her strict terms. In a final act of desperation, Valentina held a press conference to portray herself as misunderstood. Yet her self-serving narrative fell flat. The public sympathized more with Clara, who had revealed only enough details to highlight her husband's betrayal without reveling in revenge. Stripped of his title as White Tech CEO, Leonard showed up on Clara's doorstep carrying nothing but remorse. He apologized, admitting his missteps had cost him nearly everything. Still conflicted, Clara let him attend an ultrasound appointment. Hearing the steady rhythm of their baby's heartbeat, they both wept grateful for a glimmer of hope amidst the chaos. Valentina, her influence waning, quietly left New York. Some speculated she sought a fresh start overseas. Leonard, on the other hand, stepped back from the business world to focus on redeeming himself in Clara's eyes. Though pain and anger lingered, a fragile understanding took root. They would at least co-parent, providing love and stability for the child. It wasn't the neat, fairy tale ending either had envisioned, but through the ruins of shattered trust, they found one small path toward healing, a reminder that even broken crowns can sometimes be reforged. Thank you for tuning in to this emotional roller coaster of love, betrayal, and redemption. Clara's journey from supportive wife to determined survivor shows us all that strength can emerge from heartbreak, while Leonard's fall from grace reminds us that even the grandest success can crumble under the weight of lies. As these characters struggle to pick up the pieces, we see how trust can be shattered in an instant and how forgiveness can take a lifetime to earn. If this dramatic story captivated you and kept you on the edge of your seat, make sure to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to this channel for more gripping tales of real-life drama fiction. By joining us on this storytelling journey, you help keep these stories alive. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.